And welcome to our fourth session on the Applied HR module. We're going to focus here on this video on Units 7 and 8, which are employee relations and contemporary issues. So throughout the video we'll be looking at some of the key points from the manual, and I've included some reflective questions for yourself as well to have a think about. And also there's a case study on employee engagement on Harrods that we'll have a look at too. So Unit 7 then looks at employee relations, and this is a very broad topic. One of the key focuses here is on communication within an organisation, and as we'll see more recently, one of the key trends has been on employee engagement, which we'll have a look at. That's not actually in the manual, but I've included it in this video for you to appreciate. In terms of Unit 7, there are lots of learning objectives. You can see there that the focus is on looking at the different types of employee voice and barriers, which we'll have a look at. It also explores the psychological contract, which we'll explore too. The manual also focuses on partnership, negotiation, and other areas such as conflict. Our focus then will be on employee voice and the psychological contract, and of course I'm going to include employee engagement. So employee voice then has been around for a long time, and it's all to do with the way that two-way interactions or communication happens between the organisation and its staff. So the terms used interchangeably, voice and involvement. I'm sure you've heard of those before. It's actually been taken over now by the word engagement, and within engagement there is the element of voice, as we'll see very shortly. But some of the ways that organisations typically include employee voice is through what we call downward communication, and so information comes down, and then obviously information can go back up in an organisation, which is important. So keeping staff informed, which is very important. Upward problem solving, again, so putting suggestions and ideas up in the organisation towards the more senior management, that can help. Suggestion schemes, which we'll have a look at in a second with Harrods, are very important too, which help people to voice their opinions. And here we see the traditional attitude surveys which happen in organisations, and that again has been updated now with engagement surveys, which some of you may have come across. Other voice mechanisms would be meeting between line manager and employees, and finally team working would also be seen as being an employee voice mechanism where people can work as a team and share information, which is really important. So have a think about your own culture where you work in your own organisation, and what types of employee voice do you have where you work? How effective are they? I think the key here is that different organisations, of course, will have different types of employee voice mechanisms, and that depends on whether the company is unionised or non-unionised. So essentially the way the company communicates will be through different means, some direct and some more indirect. When I say direct, it's direct to the staff, or it could be indirect through a union rep and then through the staff, depending on where you work. But just think about where you work and think about how information is disseminated through. It could be website, it could be intranet, it could be through Monday morning briefings or meetings. It could be a number of things that happen, but are they effective? That's the key. If I think about that, some of the barriers to employee voice could be lack of employee enthusiasm. They have what's called apathy, where they just can't be bothered. It could well be as well that they've given plenty of ideas across, but those ideas have not been listened to or introduced, and as a result staff can become apathetic. A lack of management skills, which can happen, middle management issues, So information not going up or going down, it's sort of being kept in the middle area. And the company focusing too much on the business case and thinking about profitability and rather than the actual staff needs, and that's the key there, which is a big issue in HRM as well. Sort of more of a hard HRM where it's more focus on the company needs rather than the employee needs. So let's focus now on the new sort of employee relations, as it's called. The new employee relations has been around for a while. This is the engagement focus, and CIPD back in 2007 defined engagement as a combination of commitment to the organisation, obviously by staff, and its values, plus a willingness to help out colleagues, which is called organisational citizenship. This goes beyond job satisfaction and is not simply motivation. Engagement is something the employee has to offer. It cannot be required as part of the employee contract. So this is to do what we call discretionary behaviour, where the individual goes above and beyond maybe they call a duty, but they want to make a difference to the organisation, and they turn up to work happy. They want to share information with staff, and they feel that sense of fit in the organisation. So it's about engagement and what people have to offer the organisation. Obviously willing to offer whatever it is they have, essentially. There's another one here from another definition from the Institute of Employment Studies in the UK. Engagement here is a positive attitude held by the employee towards the organisation and its values. An engaged employee is aware of the business context and works with colleagues to improve performance within the job for the benefit of the organisation. The organisation must work to develop and nurture engagement, which requires a two-way relationship between the employer and employee. So it's a two-way relationship, and it is about getting people involved, having that voice, but it goes beyond that. Again, like I say, it's to do with matching up the values between the individual and the organisation, having a positive attitude towards the organisation where the individual or team want to make a difference to that organisation and help that organisation. Some of the facets of engagement, you can see here that there are three main types. We have intellectual engagement, and this is about an individual thinking hard about the job and how they could do it better. So I have a job, how can I do it better? I'd like to do it better. Effective engagement, this is feeling positive about the job that you do and wanting to make a difference. And finally, social engagement, this is actively taking opportunities to discuss work-related issues or improvements with the people and staff and engaging with others to make the place a better place to work. So here are the components then, really made up of motivation, commitment and citizenship towards others, and that then provides us with that engagement, which is really important. Interestingly, some of the outcomes of engagement back in 2010, Stairs and Galpin there published some research on other studies that they'd found, and you can see here that high engagement has lower absenteeism and higher employee retention, increased effort and productivity, improved quality and reduced error rates, increased sales, higher profitability, earnings per share and shareholder returns, enhanced customer satisfaction and loyalty, faster business growth, and a higher likelihood of business success. So you can see tapping into engagement is really, really important. But I think what we need to understand is with engagement is we know how it's defined, it's a bit of a mouthful, and we know what the outcomes are, the facets, but what actually drives engagement? How can we get people to be more committed, motivated, and want to become good citizens within the organisation? Well, there's two good sets of research that have been done on what drives engagement, and these are the drivers that organisations need to focus on to help engagement to flourish. And we have here job challenge, so make the job challenging, which is important. Autonomy, give staff a sense of autonomy autonomy within their organisation, within their job, as to be able to make decisions on the job. Give people, employees, a variety in the work they do. Give them ongoing feedback in the job on a regular basis. Ensure there's a good fit between the person and the job. We spoke about that in class. Opportunities for development, growth, courses, developing on the job, coaching, all important. And finally, ensure that staff are well rewarded and recognised, or recognition for the work that they do. So that's Crawford in 2013. A study before that with the CIPD, the Chartered Institute of Personal Development in the UK and Ireland. In 2010, this actual research was done in London, I think, with Kingston University. But you can see here there are 6 drivers, pretty similar to the other study. But you can see here that the job has to be meaningful, the work that you do, that makes sense to you and you like doing it. There's a supportive working environment where you work, so people support you in what you do. Senior management, communication and vision is powerful, and you really feel a part of that. You know what the vision is, and it's communicated to you, and you feel connected to that mission, vision, value. Line management, they're approachable, and generally they doing the job properly, and there's a good sense of camaraderie. Voice, that we spoke about earlier. This is being able to voice your views upwards as part of the engagement. And finally, we have that person job fit again, making sure that there's a right fit there between you and the job that you do. So those are the drivers there of engagement, which are important. And I'd like you to reflect for a few moments. Which of the employee engagement drivers have you experienced during work experience? And so during your own work experience, which drivers have you found? If you haven't found many, which ones would you like to include? And if you wanted to include or drive more engagement, you could obviously consider a couple of those drivers and try to implement 1 or 2 of them over time. It doesn't happen overnight, this, but it can happen over time with a shift in culture towards those drivers. But of course, it's all about culture at the end of the day, and it has to be driven from the top down. So as a short case study on Harrods, which you'll find on Moodle, I'd like you to have a read through the case and have a look at the 3 questions 2, 3 and 4 at the end. So don't do question 1, just do questions 2, 3 and 4 and make some notes on that. The key about the cases is that Harrods had a bit of a turnaround there based on issues that happened initially. Then they included more engagement, and they had a bit of a turnaround on that. There was less absenteeism and less turnover, and obviously overall it was quite positive. So have a look at those questions too. I think number 2 is to do with the benefits of engagement. 3 then is to do with the methods that Harrods actually use, and then fourthly, the question is the relevance of a democratic leadership style to Harrods. And in this case, to have good engagement, you do need a democratic style of leadership, which helps obviously for people to flourish and voice their opinions, etc. So moving on then to the psychological contract, which actually implicitly is about engagement. Really, it's about trust, and we see here that the contract itself, just to explain before we look through the model here, the contract itself, the psychological contract, is not written down. It's more in your heads in terms of why should I work here, why should I work harder, and it's based on trust and a sense of perception of fairness in terms of the two-way day-to-day interactions that you have and transactions with the organisation. And it could well be that where you're working at the moment, through your experience, and you have a number of expectations about being promoted, and you don't get promoted over the year. And in terms of your focus, then the actual content of your contract then is not delivered, and as a result there could be negative consequences. But generally it's implicit, it's more psychological. The contract is built up through the culture and through what you're told as well, obviously. Expectations, your experiences, where you are, and obviously HR policy and practices have a huge effect here on the contract, especially around things like a policy have been promoted or whatever. But certainly wherever your expectations, this is the key: what you expect, what you think you should have, and how fair you think you've been treated. If it's not delivered, then it can reduce trust, and it can be a bit of a nightmare trying to rebuild it. But the good consequences of the contract would mean more citizenship, which we looked at in engagement. Commitment was engagement, motivation, engagement, generally satisfaction and well-being. So another reflective question: maybe articulate your own contract at work. Is it positive? Is it negative? What's the general consensus? Do you want to make a difference where you work? Do you feel recognised for what you do? Are your expectations met? Which is the key. So that's that finishes up Unit 7 on employee relations. Obviously there are some other elements there you can have a look at in terms of partnership, and which is the old model of relations in Ireland. And then finally there's some elements on conflict. We're going to have a look now at Unit 8, which is contemporary issues. Just before we go on to that, I could say that you can use employee relations and communication in particular, or engagement as part of one of the HR practices if you wish, which could be quite useful. Unit 8 then is all about contemporary issues, and there's a number of areas here within this particular unit. It's looking at some of the Health and Safety Welfare at Work Act. I think it's probably been updated since that, in the manual, looking at redundancy payments, guidelines for redundancy, diversity within the workplace and equality, work-life balance and the causes of stress. What I'm going to focus on is diversity in the workplace, managing diversity, work-life balance approaches, and a little bit on managing stress as well. So managing diversity is very, very important as a contemporary issue. Obviously, as countries obviously become more multicultural and organisations become more diverse in their social demographics within the organisation. Diversity, then managing that is very important, especially for multinational companies as well that manage people cross-culturally. And that's important to understand how different cultures work. So some of the ways that we can manage diversity in the workplace, you may have these already, some of these practices. So things like including multicultural workshops to improve understanding and communication between groups. That happens, and that can be quite useful. In the college, for example, in AIT, there's workshops for staff there to understand more of the multicultural elements of students from different countries, what to expect and how to communicate, and they're quite useful. There could well be support groups, mentoring relationships, networks for cultural minorities where you work, advisory groups reporting to senior management based on diversity in the company, rewarding managers on the basis of their record on developing members of targeted groups, minority groups maybe, trying to recruit certain elements of society. Fast track development programs and special training opportunities for targeted groups. Training interviewers in equality, opportunities, diversity issues. It's very, very important. Operating policies that go beyond legislative requirements. Checking in that any tests used, like recruitment, etc., are cultural free and tested on diverse norm groups. That's to do with psychometric testing. Ensuring that recruitment team reflects diversity criteria, and advertising vacancies beyond traditional media to target underrepresented groups. So that's a lot of HR work that happens. practices around that. But think about your own company in terms of how does your organisation make conscious attempts to manage diversity. Work-life balance, then, another contemporary issue. Well, it was a few years ago, but I think today it's pretty much part of the norm. I think it's probably much more accepted now as really as a social, cultural element of society. More and more organisations are recognising that if we treat staff well through work-life balance, then we're going to get more productivity and higher performance. So that's obviously the thinking. Some of the approaches then: job sharing, obviously you know all about that, part-time working, career break, study leave, compressed working week where you work more hours during the day, and maybe have a day off on a Friday, term time, flexi time, home working, and annualized hours. Just a different way of breaking the working week up essentially there on the last one. But the home working has become more popular, especially with technology. Flexi time obviously is important, where you can, let's say rather than going for 9 o'clock, you can go in between 9 and 11 and make your hours up later. So these are all important approaches. Maybe have a think about your own organisation as to which ones are included. I could say most of them probably are. And finally then, managing stress then in the workplace, which is it's a huge phenomena, has been in Europe and beyond for a long time. And I remember a few years ago there was some research done in the European Union, and it was suggested that over a year there are over 20 billion euro lost in stress-related issues per year. So it's a epidemic, pandemic stress in the workplace as we work longer hours to meet the needs of bills and everything else. Some of the main causes of stress, obviously occupation, the job that you do, the type of job you do, for example. So stressful jobs, I think one of the most stressful job I think you can do is air traffic controller. So within that category it can be quite stressful. Obviously things like Gardaí, police officer, fire service can be quite stressful. Also causes can be line manager as well, because of their stress. It can be your stress and the way they manage things on a day-to-day basis. And work overload, which is doing too much work and not enough balance. Doing other people's work essentially as well. In AIT, for example, the staff are leaving, retiring, and they're not being replaced, so that workload is being shifted onto other people, and over time that can cause implications. Some strategies to reduce stress in the workplace: a need for proactiveness towards stress. I think policies in the workplace that helped to create more of a focus and awareness of stress, especially for line managers, is important. And obviously things like training, for example mindfulness training is quite common today, because training in stress management for staff and for managers, which is important too. Recruiting staff a good fit for the job, of course, because if the person is not able for the job and put into the job, that can be quite stressful. And communication is very important as well, making sure there's good communication through the organisation. That can cause frustration in the organisation. But I think the key is awareness and training, which is really, really important. And we also have things like employee assistance programs as well to help staff that can have stress outside of work, and it can create a spillover effect in the workplace. And so that can be managed too there with careful consideration for staff too. Obviously time off and what we've spoken about before in terms of flexi time and career break can help as well. But I think it's just managers being aware of stress and recognise it in themselves and others too, which is really important. So as a final reflection question, I'd like you to think about the ways in which stress is managed in your own organisation. What does your organisation do? what they don't do, and how could it be managed better.